Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Innovator Interviews, and we're joined today by Greg Seaman, who is founder of EarthEasycom. It's a really great sustainable living products and services site. You can shop there for products for the home, for the yard and garden, for your baby. It's well stocked, and we'll be talking with Greg about how they pick those products. But first, Greg, welcome to the show, and tell us, how did you end up living on an island in the Puget Sound archipelago, living off the land?
Well, thank you for that welcome. Well, when I was a youngster, I always took pleasure living in spending time in the forest, in the woods, and in nature. And I aspired towards a lifestyle, sort of a homestead lifestyle, when I grew up. And I grew up in the Long Island, New York area, and there weren't too many opportunities for me.
Yeah, I'd say it's not the homestead center of the world.
No. And I was getting progressively discouraged as the years went by, and I was in my early 20s and following a career path. And then I read a book by Vera Angiers called At Home in the Woods. And they wrote that book after experiencing the same feelings I had, and they're actually living in the same part of the country. And they eventually moved out west and found a homestead and did very well. And then they wrote a book about it all, and it made it all sound very achievable. So I decided I would follow in their footsteps, and I could quit my job, and I moved out west. I had to find a partner who would be willing to live this lifestyle, and I needed to find a connection, a way of doing this, because I didn't have too much in terms of savings. So I did find a great partner, my wife, Lindsay, and we would go out into nature together on our weekends and go camping and hiking, exploring, and I could see she really was taken by the outdoor environment and loved the lifestyle that homesteading vision promised. And so we kind of kicked around over the years and waiting for opportunity to knock. Eventually, we, of course, were turning some pages ourselves, but eventually we heard about a co-op living arrangement on a rural island off the coast. And we decided to apply for that co-op, see if we could become members. We did apply, we did become members, and it was a land co-op, not a housing co-op, a land co-op.
And this was about when?
This was in 1980.
Okay. And
we had our first child was just born. He's 3 months old. And so we joined the co-op, and we, that was 38 years ago. We're now still here, and it's been it's matured as a group, and it's done pretty well. It's been a successful experience. So that's how I got started. Again, part of it was, when you don't have a lot of money, you don't have as many opportunities, and that was partly what put me into the co-op. Ordinarily, I think I would have gone towards private ownership if I had a lot of money. But now, looking back on it, I'm really glad that we went this way. It's a different living arrangement. We don't own the land we all own the land, but none of us owns it individually. We don't even own our own houses. This is by our own agreement, because if someone has a claim on their house, a legal claim, say, on their house,
sure,
then it doesn't threaten the group. So it's kind of a new model for living. And the disadvantage, of course, is over time you don't have equity. You're not building equity, and so you can't take out equity loans. That's probably a good thing.
I would say so.
You're not really building savings on your home that you're going to sell and realize the profit someday. So it's just kind of a different mindset. We're in it for the long run. I wasn't interested in land speculation or the temporary living arrangements. This was a life commitment we were looking for.
So after 38 years, your co-op fellows are taking you seriously?
I think so.
Now, this is, on the one hand, yes, this is a new way of living, but on another, you're talking about the approach that many indigenous populations have taken toward the land. The difference is, of course, we have fixed buildings that we live in versus movable huts. And how do you see, as you look at the way that you have spent the last 38 years living in that community, evolving? I mean, what kind of big challenges did you face adopting a lifestyle that was so much so removed from Long Island?
Yeah, well, it was like starting with a blank slate. In fact, it was kind of funny because I thought I really knew. I thought I was well prepared. I took an interest in carpentry and building during my years in living in towns, and I thought I was okay. I thought I was pretty good at basic carpentry. And then when I started our new life off grid, I realized, well, first of all, we don't have any power, so forget the table saw. And forget the skill saw and all those power tools. So I had to kind of start over. I started over with hand tools, and it was many years before we even got a generator. And so we were starting from scratch. But, that's a lot of fun because we were young and fit and optimistic. And so it was all a big adventure. And the first adventure was building our own shelter. Building a house, getting a roof over our head. And there was a shack here that I started with, took over, and then built around and up. And part of that shack still exists today. A glorified shack now. But, we gradually learned the skills to build our houses. There are other people whose example we could follow. If we had a big question, we could go to a neighbor who's about a quarter mile away and ask his ideas. And so it was a learning and sharing experience, and it still is to this day. Some people come to us, young people come to us with questions, and we go to other people with questions too. So it's kind of a shared learning experience. It's a lot of fun.
Nothing about this sounds unpleasant at all. I mean, it sounds just fabulous. Do people come and determine later that they don't really feel they belong in that environment?
Yes, and that's a good question. I would say, just from my own casual observation, that about 50% of the people, usually young people, to try to start a life off-grid, leave within a year or two, just because it didn't suit them for one reason or another. It's not for everyone. So I suggest to people who are wanting to try out this lifestyle to one, go to the place where you want to be. Just go there, even if you don't know anyone, and just make yourself known. Talk to the locals, tell them you're looking to live there and you're interested in the idea. And most importantly, try to rent a place for a few months. Ideally, if you can rent a place over the winter, because the winter is what really drives people out.
Sure.
And so if you can live here for a year through the winter, now you're really informed as to what this lifestyle is like. You're going to make a better decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you have not eschewed capitalism. But you're describing living off grid, but you run a website. How did that come about? Well,
simple desperation. Desperation drives you to do amazing things. And I was at a point where one of my children was starting high school, which is off island. You have to go off island for high school, and then. And my current job, a business I've been working for years, was kind of melting down. It was fading, and so my income suddenly is disappearing. My meager income was going from meager to zero. So I was a little desperate, and and one of my friends said, "Well, what will you do? What will you do when you go to the other side to help your child in high school?" And I said, well, there's a computer over there. I'm going to start a website, and I'm going to call it EarthEasy, and I'm going to try to put information in there that I've learned from my experience here that is transferable to people in cities and towns. Because I felt I was enjoying a successful life. Things were working out well. My kids were happy, my wife was happy, we were fit and healthy, and I just felt we were thriving as a family. And we never really had much money. We did it without money. And so I felt there was something to offer there. And so I set myself to the task of sort of ferreting out what are those things, identifying what are the things in our lifestyle that are transferable to people in anywhere,
Right.
and then how can I iterate these lifestyles best to put them on page. And so I developed an out. I spent. I got a little notebook. I said, I'm not going to start this website unless I can come up with 100 like factoids or little items that relate, that I can take from here and apply elsewhere. And so I walked around with that notebook and just kept thinking, and it got to where I had 300 ideas. I had 300 items on the list. I said, well, that's it. I'm starting the website. I've got lots of meat here to put on the bones. So I got started building the site and organizing it, and I got more excited as it came out, as it was developing. It kind of got me more excited, and it got me to research areas that maybe I didn't have as much experience with, but still were part of the package of sustainable lifestyle. Sustainable lifestyle covers lots of the whole spectrum of living and gardening and what you eat, how you play, and what you wear, and it's the whole thing. So there are some areas that I didn't have direct experience in, such as hybrid cars, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I identified the other areas across the spectrum. So I sort of have a robust presentation that would be of use to anyone. And so I spent a lot of time in the libraries and talking with researchers and academics, mm-hmm. and compiling information. And over a year or so, I put together, filled in all the pages that were sort of secondary to our own direct experience pages. And then that filled out the site.
And how did the store come about? Because you have a great selection of stuff that is better curated than any other green site that I've seen.
That is a wonderful thing to hear. Our staff is going to love you for saying that, because they work really hard to accomplish that.
They deserve it.
Well, thank you. Well, here's the thing. When the site was first formed, it was information only, a content-only site. I earned a living through that site by selling advertisements, mm-hmm. and paid links. And I wasn't getting rich, but I was making maybe $20,000 a year mm-hmm. on my website for a few years, which was very significant. And my wife also got a job as a TA in the school where my child was going to school. So mm-hmm. that was also a great help. And so anyhow, I didn't want to put any products on the site. The reason was because I didn't want a product to challenge the integrity of the page.
Yeah.
You're writing a page on composting, and then you're selling a composter at the bottom. And maybe the page is going on and on about compost tumblers, why they're so good. And then you're selling a compost tumbler. I don't want people to think this information is biased or skewed, because mm-hmm. what we're really interested in is selling products. And so we're going to, maybe twist our view of this particular topic, steer it a little bit in the direction of the product. I didn't want people to think that. I want them to value the information and not have anything compromise it.
Right.
And so for about 5 years, no products. And finally one day, one of my sons said, Dad, what's wrong with putting a composter on the composting page? And it can be one that you have personally used,
sure,
that you recommend. And so that was interesting. And then simultaneously, I learned what drop shipping is. I just happened to read an article, and I learned what drop shipping is. And I realized I can sell composters without having to stock them and warehouse them myself, which requires an investment that I don't have. And so that just was the light bulb that turned on. And then suddenly I was able to go through the site and pick the pages where I could put a product and feel I wasn't compromising anything and putting that product there. And sometimes I would state what I'm saying to you on the page itself.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that on the page. I'm uncomfortable selling this product, but trust me, it's not compromising the integrity of the page.
Yeah, I believe me, I know exactly how you feel as the publisher of 911. It's hard to take advertising.
And so over time, the products have product list has grown, and the site kind of grew legs and took off and got better and more successful, and more people came on staff-wise. And now today, we like the product revenue model because we're independent. I don't like the ad revenue model because you're dependent on advertisers who can be whimsical. I just wanted to control. And so I felt we have the products, we have our own products now. We've got control of the whole, all aspects of the business. And so as soon as we made our commitment to expand our product line, right away we hired staff to curate those products, as you say, to identify these products and to vet the products for their sustainability. For their sustainability attributes, and in many cases, in the beginning, in all cases, in the beginning, the products were also sent to me personally to use and to experience with, because I've got a really big garden and orchard here, so it's easy for me to try out all sorts of things relating to gardening and orcharding, and so. So eventually, the product team got so good at identifying and vetting products that I realized I was really not even needed. I didn't need to vet every product. So they've independently developed this product list. I'm really proud of them because it's really tough to, because so many products come your way that look really tempting because they've got great margins or they've got great distribution setups or whatever. There's reasons you want to sell them, but in your heart of hearts, this isn't quite cut the mustard. People don't really need this in their lives, so we're not gonna sell it.
Well, so how many products do you tend to look at before you make a decision? I mean, that must be it is a lot of work, obviously, but what's the attrition rate from people trying to get you to sell something to what you actually?
Well, I can't really answer that accurately because I'm kind of out of the loop in that regard today. But my sense is, I'm going to guess and just say maybe 1 out of 20 things that are submitted to us end up in our store. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get a lot of. I personally get a lot of submissions from China, all sorts of factories. I've got my name on their email list, and in many cases they'll send products over without even us asking, and just here's a composter, use it, try it, sell it.
So one of the things that you've talked about on your site that I wanted to ask you about is the idea of bringing these rural skills into the cities and suburbs so that people can be more self-reliant, so that they are more connected with their world, as well as understand the relationship between what they do and the impact on the world. Tell us a little about your thinking about how people can, for instance, take the products that you sell and change their lives even within a city.
Okay, well, the first one is the whole world of gardening, and container gardening, raised bed gardening. We're seeing rooftop gardening. We're seeing indoor gardening, and even the simple small gardening setup is something that really does help people connect with nature, and it means a lot to people. And it can help them develop their attitudes towards the greater environment that surrounds them. So that's the first thing we look at is the gardening sector, and where this works in the cities. We're seeing community gardens now, and we're developing information on community gardens and helping people learn how they can participate and or develop their own community gardens. We'll be interviewing a woman in upstate New York shortly who's who's running a very successful community garden with over 100 raised beds. And the stories, the anecdotes that go with this garden are just gratifying, especially the young people who are taking to it. And so the whole gardening in cities is really the big thing that we look at.
And it does create meeting places, which I'm always struck by. The community garden is one of the new town squares.
Oh, great.
And with that, so what other kinds of what do you think the best practices that somebody living in a suburb or in a city could adopt from the lifestyle you lived?
Well, I think one of the most important and the best practices that people can adopt has to do with how they raise their children, mm-hmm. and the activities they provide their children. And we're living in a natural environment. We've had the benefit of our children growing in nature. But I'm seeing more and more, and I get impassioned letters from people, parents, who are saying, "My kid won't go outside. He's been in his room for 6 hours. This is day after day.
Yep.
And this is a common thing. I met a woman who's a retired teacher from Florida, and she said she goes by the schoolyard every day. And she said now the big difference that she's noticed is that there's nobody in the schoolyard anymore. After school, they used to be, playing football or soccer or basketball or whatever. She said, it's empty. Where are those kids? And where they are is they're in their houses behind their computers and smartphones and mm-hmm. entertaining themselves with all the amazing technological entertainments that are out there. So we provide information to help people in that regard. We provide, parent-child activities, outdoor education activities, outdoor education learning opportunities. And then we provide, those are guides that are like permanent pieces on the site. Then we also have blog articles that we write periodically addressing that same topic. Sometimes we have outside writers come and help us who have their own expertise. So, we're really working on ways parents can help to get their children outdoors and experience nature.
That's fabulous. And so folks listening, you should check out EarthEasy.com. There's a lot of great content there and a fantastic store. Take a look around. I think particularly raised beds as we're getting ready for the spring is something that a lot of people would be paying attention to. Greg, thanks very much for joining us today.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll be checking out EarthEasy on a regular basis. Folks, this is another episode of Earth911's Innovator Interviews. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we'll be back again soon with another fantastic guest. Take care.
Take care, Mitch.